بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وارزقنا علما تنفعنا به آمين يا رب العالمين الحمد لله. Lesson 2 of our Foundations of Aqeedah course. In the previous lesson we covered some of the importance and the importance of studying Aqeedah, as well as the ruling on studying the science of Aqeedah. In tonight's lesson, we are moving on, and we're going to start off speaking about some definitions, like what is Aqeedah, defining the science of Aqeedah, and we'll speak about the masadir of Aqeedah as well, which is the sources of Aqeedah, which is very important that we speak about. So firstly, the word Aqeedah is derived from the root word Ayn, Qaf and Dal. Aqd, Ayn, Qaf and Dal. And this means to tie something firmly. To tie something firmly, to make something strong, or it could mean to be certain about something, or to affirm something with conviction. This is in terms of the linguistic meaning. Yani in terms of the Arabic language, this is what the word Ayn, Qaf and Dal, where it comes from. Okay, and Aqeedah is rooted within this word, with these letters. For example, we can think of an example of the word Ayn, Qaf, Dal. Uqda. Yeah, where's Uqda? Uqda. What else? Something that's tied up. Something that's tied up. Is Aqeedah, we said Ayn, Qaf, Dal means something to tie something up. So if I tied a piece of string up, what will happen to it? It knots. Where's the word knots in the Quran? Huh? No? Where's the word knots in the Quran? You should know it. وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. Ayn, Qaf, Dal, Uqad. Right? What does it mean? Knots. Seeking protection in Allah from the evil of the nafathati, those women who used to blow into knots, sorcerers. They used to tie knots and make sihr, blow into it. The word uqad Allah used, because uqad means to tie something out, to knot it. So this is the linguistic meaning of these words, right? Aqeedah comes from those root letters, Ayn, Qaf, Dal. Technically, what does the word Aqeedah mean? It means a firm belief or certainty that's free from doubt, regardless of its truth or falsehood. Now, this is Aqeedah in a general sense. When we talk about a belief system, it could be, and everybody has an Aqeedah. You with me? Muslims have an Aqeedah, so do non-Muslims. So we have a general definition, which is, it's what you believe in your heart, what's tied in your heart with conviction, right? What's settled in the heart with conviction, it's tied firmly into the heart. This is your belief. It could be correct, it could be false. It's still an Aqeedah. Like we have the Aqeedah of the Muslims, as I said, which will be the correct Aqeedah. Then you have a false Aqeedah, which will be the Aqeedah of the non-Muslims, or deviant groups, and so forth. So our Aqeedah al-Islamiyya, which is the Islamic creed, is a firm belief in, number one, Allah's Lordship, which we know as Tawheed of Ar-Rububiyyah. And we will speak about these concepts in more detail, because this is what Aqeedah is. This is what studying Aqeedah is all about. It's to study about Allah, about His Lordship, number one, the fact that He is the only Rabb, the Creator, the Sustainer, the Controller of all affairs. Secondly, it's to believe in Allah's divinity, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, which is also known as Tawheed of Ibadah, Tawheed of worship, that He alone is the one that deserves to be worshipped. Thirdly, the Tawheed of Allah's names and attributes, Tawheedul Asma'i was Sifat, that Allah has certain names and attributes. How do we believe in these names and attributes? What do we believe about them? Do we believe in them? There are certain groups who reject it. Certain groups reject Allah's names. Certain groups reject Allah's attributes. certain groups believe in them, but they reinterpret the meanings. So they will say the attribute doesn't actually mean this, what it actually says, it means something different. Where do we stand? Right? This is something that we will delve into. It's a matter of Aqeedah. And it includes the belief in Allah's angels, His scriptures, His messengers, the last day, and the divine decree. If you look at points 1 to 4, it's all about what? The 6 pillars of Iman, correct? So Aqeedah starts with the 6 pillars of Iman, and then it also includes more. And it's more inclusive than just the 6 pillars. So Iman, the 6 pillars of Iman is an aspect of Aqeedah. Aqeedah al-Islamiyah also includes complete submission to Allah in judgment. Allah's hukum. That when we want to pass a law or a judgment or a ruling, we're supposed to go back to Allah, the book of Allah and the messenger of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In judgment, in command, in obedience, and obedience while adhering to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in general, this is a definition of our creed. It's to believe in these pillars of Iman as well as other aspects of belief. Core aspects of Islamic creed. There are some core aspects of Islamic creed that we want to touch on. Number 1 is faith in the unseen. Faith in the unseen. If we look at how Allah described the believers right at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This book has no guidance in it. It's a guidance for the people of taqwa. The first description Allah gives the people of taqwa is what? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. They believe in the unseen. That's the first thing Allah says in the Quran. If you open the Quran, Allah describes the Muslims, the believers, the people of taqwa, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. They have iman in the ghaib. They are people who believe in the unseen. So a Muslim, someone who believes in the unseen, 100%, he has no doubt that there is an unseen world. He cannot see it, he cannot hear of it. He has no knowledge of it except what is found in the Quran and Sunnah. Our knowledge of the ghaib is what? Is non-existent, except what Allah has informed us in the Quran about it and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ about it. But it's because of it, the fact that it's mentioned, we believe in it 100%. So faith in the unseen is an integral part of the Aqeedah of the Muslim. That we believe in all matters revealed in the Quran or confirmed by the Sunnah regarding the unseen. Anything that's mentioned in the 2 wahys, 2 revelations, we believe in. And it includes all fundamentals of religion agreed upon by the righteous predecessors, the Salaf. Question, who are the Salaf? And this is an important point that we should clarify. When we say righteous predecessors, pious predecessors, Salafus Salih, the Salaf, what's meant by this? Who is meant by this? First 3 generations. So generally this is the I could say the agreed upon answer. The first 3 generations or the blessed generations. Why? Because in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he praised these generations and he said, Khayrun nasi qarni. The best of all people is my generation. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. Then those who followed them, and then those who followed them. And he stopped. He never mentioned after them. And this is why they call the 3 blessed generations. Because the Prophet described them as the best. First the Sahaba, then the Tabi'een, then the Atba'u Tabi'een, those who followed them. Tayyib. Is it any person from amongst them? Any person from amongst the Tabi'een, the Atba'u Tabi'een? Is this what we mean? No, we don't mean this. Because somebody could come and bring me a deviant that lived in their generation. Somebody could come and show me an innovator who had a new creed who lived in their generation. So this is not what is meant either. What's meant is what the Imams agreed upon. When we talk about Aqeedah, and we will see that when we get to the Masadir, What's meant by this is what the Imams of the Tabi'in agreed upon, not some fringe view that was found in that era. This is not what we refer to as that's the way of the Salaf. Somebody could bring, like I said, an innovation and say, look, we found this person who lived amongst the Tabi'in. He's a Tabi'i. He met the Sahabi. And he's a Muslim. But look, he did this. Or he believed this. That doesn't mean that this is now considered the way of the Salaf. What the righteous predecessors believed. Because you will also find that the Imams of that time refuted that belief system. Or that action. So this is part of the core aspects of creed, is that we believe in what they agreed upon. And it's mentioned there, the fundamentals of the religion agreed upon by the righteous predecessors. So we are not looking at individual opinions, not individual opinions, what they agreed upon. That's part of our Aqeedah. We will agree with him. And we shouldn't differ with what the Salaf agreed upon. Okay? Practical elements, commanding the good and forbidding evil, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi al Munkar. Some ulama said this is attached to your creed. It's attached to creed. Right? Others have said, no, this is an ibadah. It's a fruit from your creed. It's a fruit from your creed. Yani, as a result of your aqeedah, you are going to do this act of worship, which is da'wah, which is commanding the good and forbidding the evil. The next point is important, which is loving and hating for Allah's sake, which is al-hubbu fillah wal-bughdu fillah. There's a seat over here. Right? Al-hubbu fillah wal-bughdu fillah. To love and to hate for the sake of Allah. In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَوْثَقَ عُرَى الْإِيمَانِ الْحُبُّ فِي اللَّهِ وَالْبُغْضُ فِي اللَّهِ, which means the strongest grasp of Iman, the strongest grasp or handhold of Iman is to love for the sake of Allah and to hate for the sake of Allah. أَوْثَقَ عُرَى الْإِيمَانِ الْحُبُّ فِي اللَّهِ وَالْبُغْضُ فِي اللَّهِ. So this is Iman. It's part of our faith. What does this mean? Loving for the sake of Allah, hating for the sake of Allah. Who can explain this? So he says loving your spouse for the sake of Allah. Or getting married for the sake of Allah, like as an ibadah. Someone better than you. So it's for the sake of Allah. Right? Okay, we do the action for the sake of Allah alone. This is like ikhlas. Yes. Okay. طيب, doing things for the sake of Allah, believe you'll be rewarded. Abstaining from things for the sake of Allah, believe you'll be rewarded for that as well. Okay? Yes. We love that person. Ahsan. So, we love and we hate for the sake of Allah, because of our aqeedah. It's part of our aqeedah that we do this. Yani, we love individuals because of their creed, their aqeedah, and because of their actions. This is loving purely for the sake of Allah. I don't know the brother. What I know about him is, he's a Muslim, number one. So I have a certain level of love for him. Purely because he's a Muslim, I love him for the sake of Allah. Right? Number two, the brothers in the masjid, the brothers mutadayyin, as they say, which is a practicing Muslim. So my love for him increases. Or the person's an alim, he's a scholar of the deen. He's teaching people the deen. He's written books. He's benefiting people. So my love for him increases. He's benefiting the ummah. So I just love him. Because I love Allah and I love the deen. I love for Allah's sake. Anything that's attached to this deen, attached to propagating the deen, strengthening the deen, I will love it. And I love the person who is standing by this. Because we love for the sake of Allah. This is something Allah loves, so we love it. This is a person that's doing what Allah loves, so we love him for this. Understand? This is an Aqeedah issue. Similarly, we have bughdu fillah. We hate for the sake of Allah. But we hate actions, yes, but also the people that are doing those actions. We have hatred for them for those actions. Be it obviously the head kufr and shirk. We hate it because that's the most hated thing to Allah. If somebody's, and if you love somebody, yes, you love your mother, you love your child. If something upsets them, it will upset you. Yes, if something is in the home and your mother is upset about it, you are going to get it out of the home. Right? You're going to work to remove this thing from the house. If something is upsetting your child, you're going to step in as a parent, as a guardian, to protect your child and get rid of what's angering them or upsetting them. A mu'min, a Muslim loves for Allah first and foremost. Anything that he knows angers Allah, as a mu'min, what you're going to do? You want to cut it out. Because your love for Allah comes first and foremost. You want to get rid of this because I know this angers Allah Azza wa Jal. And this person is doing this, so you will naturally have some hatred towards him as well. This is loving for Allah's sake and hating for Allah's sake. When Ibrahim alayhi salam left his people, what did he say? بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةُ وَالْبَغْضَاءُ. Between us and you, he said to them, is enmity and hatred. Use the word hatred in the Quran. Baghda. Because what were they upon? Idol worship and kufr. They refused to accept the message, so that creates enmity. That creates enmity. Ibrahim did not have hatred towards them because they tried to kill him, or because they did whatever they did to him. The prophets never took revenge for themselves. Hatta our prophet, Nabiyuna Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you read his seerah, you read his sunnah, he never became angry with the Quraysh because they physically abused him, or because they verbally abused him. He never became angry with them because they never took revenge for themselves. They overlooked. They forgive and forgave. Forgave and forgot, should I say. Forgive and forget, right? But when Allah's laws were being trampled, when they turned away from the Quran, they rejected Tawheed, they rejected, this is when enmity became apparent. And hatred became apparent to the point where they fought each other on a battlefield. Because they loved for Allah's sake and they hated for Allah's sake. It's part of Iman. It's part of Iman to love and hate for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. As the hadith I mentioned says. So that's a big part of Aqeedah that sometimes is overlooked. That sometimes is not discussed. Yes? And it can lead to major issues. Like when you love a disbeliever more than a believer. This can lead to major Aqeedah flaws and issues. To the point it can lead to kufr. To the point it can lead to kufr if you take their side, if you fight the Muslim on the side of the disbeliever, it can lead to disbelief. Right, but we'll get there inshallah in another more detailed discussion. You shouldn't love a disbeliever. Aslan, unless it's a natural love. For example, somebody's mother is a disbeliever. Somebody became Muslim, his mother is a disbeliever. Naturally, he will love his mother. This is tabi'i. It's something natural, he can't change that. But he will have hatred towards her for her kufr, for her refusal to accept. Understand? But a normal disbeliever, you check the verses of the Quran, and you will find Allah is very, very strict on this issue. Not to show them tulquna ilayhim bil mawaddah. Do not show them love and compassion or mawaddah, love. Right? Refer to Surah Mumtahina. The 28th juz, refer to the surah. There's a number of ayat in this chapter of the Quran that Allah speaks about this issue of loving and hating. Allah said, لا تتخذوا عدوي وعدوكم أولياء تلقون إليهم بالمودة وقد كفروا بما من الحق. Don't take my enemies and your enemies as awliya, allies, people you love, protectors. And do not show them love, mawadda, when they have disbelieved in what came to them of the haqq. They disbelieved what came to them of the haqq, so don't show them mawadda. Refer to this surah, inshallah, for more on this, these type of ayat. The default thing is you should hate a disbeliever for his kufr. There will be natural, like I said, attachment to people, respect. And this doesn't mean, by the way, that you disrespect them, that you treat them with dhulm, oppression. You should still show kindness, you should still show justice, fairness. You should still show the akhlaq of a Muslim and do da'wah and nasiha and want the best for them. This is still part of, all of this is still in its place. But internally we still have what? Hatred for their kufr. They're still doing acts of kufr. They're still refusing to accept, so we have hatred for them for this. Right? And this is the balance that we should try and strike. This leads us directly to the next point, which is al-wala wal-bara. Loyalty and enmity. It's based upon your love and hatred. You have loyalty and enmity towards or for the sake of Allah. Part of your aqeedah, that you are loyal to believers. You are with the believers always, on the side of the believers always, against the side of disbelief and kufr. Okay? Does this mean if a Muslim and a non-Muslim is in business, your Muslim friend comes to you and says, let's cheat this guy out, wala wal bara? This is not what's intended, right? This doesn't mean you take the side of dhulm, of wrong. Okay? But we'll discuss this again, inshallah, maybe after Ramadan. If we get into the book Usul al-Thalatha, it starts with a lot of this loyalty and enmity and so forth. So a summary of the topics covered in Aqeedah, obviously is Tawheed, which we will definitely get to. The articles of faith, the 6 pillars of Iman, matters of the unseen, some practical obligations like loyalty to Allah, loving for the sake of Allah, loving the Muslims, the righteous people, the Sahaba, the Prophets, and also refutations is part of Aqeedah, that we respond to false ideologies, deviant sects, and destructive philosophies. This is also part of our creed. This is to protect the correct Aqeedah. You have to, at times, refute and respond false ideologies. And this is the Quran. The Quran does this. The Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ does this. And the way of the Salaf, they were always doing this. Our Sharia has been split into 2 sections, 2 categories. One is i'tiqadiyat, which is beliefs, and the other is amaliyat, our practical rulings. Obviously, i'tiqadiyat is what we are studying in this course, our beliefs, which are matters of faith and are not connected to matters of performing actions. So you will not find us talking about fiqh in this classroom. That's on a Wednesday, inshallah. So opposite, 2 different sections of the deen. Right? This we can call the essentials, asliyah, the foundations of the deen. And the practical rulings is your amaliyat, which is the second category of the deen. You want to split it into 2 types, we can say i'tiqadiyat and amaliyat, practical and beliefs. Yes? So the practicals will be the method of performing actions. How do I worship Allah? In Aqeedah we will speak about worshipping Allah alone, the one who's deserved of worship. What is Iman? Right? In fiqh we will get into the practicalities, but how do I do this? How do I actually perform these acts of worship and so forth? And this we can refer to as branches. So you have the foundation, which is your Aqeedah. The branches is the practical rulings. Nature of Aqeedah issues. Matters of Aqeedah are non-negotiable and not open for debate, as they are firm principles and certainties. This is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like this, where there is no room for debate. Aqeedah should not be a back and forth. Yes, it should be clear cut. It should be simple, easy to understand, and it's not something that's negotiable. Where we can, let's tolerate the ikhtilaf. Khalas, you take your view, I'll take my view. You have your belief, I have my belief. Lakum deenukum waliya deen. For you is your deen, and for me is my deen. He says, am I applying the ayah correctly? People say this. Oh, that's your view. Lakum deenukum waliya deen. For you is your deen, is for me is my deen. What's wrong with this? Firstly, Allah said, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. The whole ayah is addressing disbelievers. And when Allah said, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٍ, He's not praising you. He's saying to them, for you is your religion. Go. For us is our religion. You upon kufr and shirk, we upon tawheed and iman. So when people use this in the ummah now amongst each other, Muslims saying, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٍ, they have not understood the ayah at all. They're using it as a, as if it's a good thing. Khalas, no problem. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٍ. Completely distorting the verse. Completely distorting the verse. The verse is not there to praise ikhtilaf or to say each one to his own. It's not supposed to be like this. So Aqeedah is referred to as the foundations of Islam, certainties, essentials, because it's supposed to be non-negotiable. It's supposed to be fixed. Hence, if you go back to the Sahaba, you are not going to find Sahaba refuting other Sahaba on Aqeedah issues. One Sahabi debating another Sahabi on Allah's names and attributes, on divine decree. Sahaba were all basically unanimous in their creed. They were unanimous in their creed. They didn't differ amongst each other. And when there was a person who came with differing, they clarified. We have the hadith in the Sunan of Abu Dawood, where a man came to Abdullah ibn Umar, radiallahu anhuma, son of Umar ibn al-Khattab. And he mentioned that in his country, he comes to Hijaz, Makkah, Medina. He says to Ibn Umar, in my country, there are people who reject Qadr. They don't believe in Allah's decree. Okay, they don't reject in Allah. They don't believe in Allah's decree. They Qadariyah. One of the early sects called the Qadaris, Qadariyah. What did Ibn Umar say? Lakum dinukum waliya din? Ibn Umar said to them, say to them, they have no connection to me and I have nothing to do with them. That is not the Aqeedah of the Muslims. They and me, we are apart. We are not the same. Right? And making it clear that this is not an issue where we can, let's respectfully differ. You have your view, I have my view, but we're all brothers. No. Say to them, I have nothing to do with you, and they have nothing to do with me. And this is part of al-wala wal-bara, loving and hating for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Before we get to the sources, some other names that you find for Aqeedah in Islamic scholarship. Right? These days you will find ilmul aqeedah or i'tiqad or aqaid. It's all the same. It's just plural. Right? Sometimes one is like aqaid is a plural of aqeedah. This obviously refers to the science of creed and belief. Examples, Aqeedah to Salaf by As-Sabuni. These are famous books, right, that you will find. Sharh Usul al-I'tiqad Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah by Imam al-Lalaka'i. Again, you will find the name, the usage of the word Aqeedah or I'tiqad in the title. Ilm al-Tawheed. Some people will write on Tawheed, but it's about Aqeedah. For example, Kitab al-Tawheed by Imam al-Bukhari. Imam al-Bukhari had a Kitab al-Tawheed. And likewise Imam Ibn Khuzaymah. And I'm looking at the classical scholars, not the latter-day scholars. As-Sunnah. Kitab al-Sunnah, the book of the Sunnah. The early scholars would write books called the Sunnah. The entire book is a book of creed, beliefs. Because to them, if you're upon the Sunnah, you're upon the correct Aqeedah. If you're upon Bid'ah, you're upon the wrong Aqeedah. So they wrote books called As-Sunnah. They were books of Aqeedah. You think it's Kitab al-Sunnah, you open up, you think, oh, how the Prophet did this and the Prophet did that and he's practical. No. It's all matters of belief, Iman, Tawheed, Qadr, the last day, all matters of Aqeedah. Abdullah ibn Ahmad, Abdullah, the son of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad, his son Abdullah, wrote the book Kitab al-Sunnah. All matters of belief. Ibn Abi Asim, Sharh al-Sunnah by al-Barbahari, these are classical Imams. Right? Usuluddin is another common name used for the science of Aqeedah by Imam al-Baghdadi, or Al-Ibana an Usul al-Diyana by Ibn Battah, early scholars. Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, anybody know this book? Abu Hanifa. There's ikhtilaf on it, whether it's actually his book or not. So you will see in the notes as it's attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa. Right? So he's got Fiqh al-Asghar and Fiqh al-Akbar. Asghar means small, Akbar means big. So Fiqh al-Akbar they refer to as Aqaid, matters of belief. Fiqh al-Asghar was for the fiqh issues. But the ulama did differ on whether it is his book or not. Right? That's not, again, is a discussion for another day. Ash-Shari'ah, Kitab al-Shari'ah, most famous Kitab by Imam al-Ajurri, early scholar of Islam. He wrote the book Ash-Shari'ah, matter of beliefs. That's it, from cover to cover. It's a book on Aqeedah. And lastly, Al-Iman, right? Kitab al-Iman by Ibn Manda, Kitab al-Iman by Abu Ubaid. The reason I'm mentioning this is, again, you find shubuhat going around, which is your misconceptions, your doubts, your argumentation, where people come to you and say, Aqeedah is not even mentioned in the Quran. Allah didn't mention Aqeedah in the Quran. Why should we study Aqeedah? It has to believe in Allah. I don't know if you're following social media, trends, famous speakers, right? This is what's happening. You have a speaker, I'll mention his name, Daniel Haqiqatu, right? Very famous. These are the things that he's saying these days. Tawheed is to say La ilaha illallah. You people that talk about Tawheed is this and Tawheed is and Tawheed, and the whole long list is all craziness. Anyone who says La ilaha illallah is a muwahid. Is a muwahid. Whether he worships other than Allah, whether to the point he's defending Shia Imams, saying they were not clearly upon kufr. No, even if they believe this, not really kufr. He himself doesn't know what he's talking about. Because he's a jahil. He's a jahil. He's just famous because of his eloquence. Right? So it's important because the Salaf wrote books. Just because they didn't use the term Aqeedah doesn't mean it's not there. Some of them wrote it Al-Iman, Al-Shari'ah, Al-Sunnah, Usuluddin, Al-Tawheed. They used different terms, right? But it was all discussing the same things. Right? So if you really want to go back to the books of the Salaf, which is very, very, very important for a student of knowledge, not to be connected only to latter day works. It's to be connected to the early scholars' works. Because that is where you find the difference between Ahlul Sunnah and Ahlul Bid'ah. Ahlul Bid'ah cannot go back to early works because they don't have early works. They can't go back to the Tabi'een and Atba'u Tabi'een because they don't have scholarly works from those days. So it's important for Talib al-Ilm to know these books, to have access to these books, and you can prove your creed through these books. So if somebody comes to you and they say, Ibn Abdul Wahhab was this, why are you studying his book, Usul al-Thalatha? He's a Najdi, he's a Khariji, he was a this. Say, fine, take Usul al-Thalatha, put in a shelf. Let's take Bukhari's book. Let's take Ibn Manda's book. Let's take Ibn Battah's book. It's the same Aqeedah. It's the same Aqeedah. So why we use Ibn Abdul Wahhab? He simplified it. He simplified it, that's it. If you open the two, it's the same content, but the first is just a hadith, for example, with a title or a chapter heading. Latter day scholars come and they simplify things because the level of ignorance is getting higher, the level of knowledge is getting lower. So we need simplified works. All the time the student needs to simplify things for the layman. Why? Because the level of knowledge is getting lower and lower and lower. In 20 years' time, the teacher will have to simplify it even more because the levels of knowledge are dropping. This has always been the situation. Look at classical tafsir versus latter day tafsir. If you open a classic book of tafsir, you won't understand what you're reading. If it's a commentary, now we need, this simplified tafsir. It just gives you like a basic, easy translation. Oh, that's what the ayah means. Just the gist of it. Understand? So everything has to be simplified. To end off the last section is sources of Aqeedah and the methodology of the Salaf in acquiring it. Number one, Aqeedah is based upon revelation. It is tawqifiyah. It is tawqifiyah, which means it's based upon revelation. Very important. Right? Aqeedah is established solely through evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. It is not open to ijtihad. What is ijtihad? Ijtihad is the individual opinion of a scholar. When he researches and he comes to his own conclusion and he passes his ruling. That's ijtihad. Aqeedah is not open to ijtihad. The door of ijtihad is shut for Aqeedah matters. Not for me to come to my own conclusion. In fiqh, the imams, the door is open. In fiqh, where there was leeway, they would do ijtihad. And they would differ with each other. And they respected the differences. Hence you have the madhahib of fiqh. Yes, Abu Hanifa's madhab, Malik's madhab, Ash-Shafi'i's madhab, and Ahmad's madhab. In the early days, there were more. Tabari had a madhab, Al-Layth ibn Sa'd had a madhab, Al-Thawri had a madhab, Al-Awza'i had a madhab, fiqh. They all had a madhab. Those madhabs eventually disappeared. But you know what? In Aqeedah, they were all the same. They didn't have a madhab of Aqeedah. The Aqeedah was one. Because Aqeedah is not like fiqh. Our sources of law for fiqh, there's ample. For Aqeedah, it's two. The Quran and the Sunnah. If you want, you can add ijma' in this, which is agreement of the scholars. Agreement, that which is agreed upon. Like I mentioned earlier, the Salaf agreed on something, you'll accept it. But technically, you really get into it, ijma' is something that it will still go back to the Quran and Sunnah ultimately. It will still be based upon a ruling that is from the, or something mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah. So this is very important, because once again, this is the difference between Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and Ahlul Bid'ati wal Hawa. Groups of innovation and people who follow their desires. Their sources of law are not strictly the Quran and Sunnah. Their sources for Aqeedah goes beyond the Quran and Sunnah or outside of the Quran and Sunnah. For some of them, the Quran and Sunnah is secondary. What does this mean? They only refer to the Quran and Sunnah if it's in alignment with their intellect, for example. If it's in alignment with their understanding. So the Quran and Sunnah is not the first recall or recourse, but the first point that they turn to. So knowing the sources of law is very important, because this will then result in the actual belief that we acquire. So we have the methodology of the Salaf, which is the early generations, as again the Salafus Salih, and how they adhered to the Quran and Sunnah. Right? Their approach was what is affirmed in the Quran and Sunnah regarding Allah, they believed in. They acted upon it and affirmed it. And what was not established, they rejected and negated concerning Allah. The result, their adherence ensured unity in belief, a unified community, and correct understanding. Right? They took the text as it came. Allah said this, that's what we believe. We don't open the door to, you know what, this doesn't sit with me. I can't understand how Allah can be above His throne. So I'm not going to accept this. I'm not going to reject the ayah because then it's kufr. What's the next point? I'm not going to reject the ayah. What am I going to do? Change the meaning, reinterpret it, make tafsir or ta'wil. Maybe Allah didn't actually mean this. So maybe He meant something different. What could He have meant? Let's look at the word istiwa. It actually means istawla, which means He captured the throne. Allah captured His throne. He didn't go above the throne, He captured the throne. Understand? Now, this methodology that they're applying of understanding the ayat is actually based upon principles that they learnt from the Greek philosophers, Greek philosophers, like who? Plato and Aristotle and the likes of them. So what happened is later on, these books, Greek philosophies, got translated into Arabic and it got spread amongst the Muslims. And the Muslims got access to these philosophies, these principles. And it developed into a science called Ilmul Kalam. Ilmul Kalam. It's a science. That is now what they use to derive their Aqeedah based upon these principles, these sciences. Understand? Again, we can go a lot deeper into this. There are certain sects that are built upon this, but this was not the way of the Sahaba. This was not the way of the leading Imams of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and his teacher Imam Ash-Shafi'i, and his teacher Imam Malik, and Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahumullah. Likewise, the scholars of Hadith, Imam al-Bukhari, and Muslim, and Abu Dawood, and Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, the 6 Imams, and other than them like Ibn Khuzaymah, and Ad-Darimi, the great collectors of Hadith, the great Imams of Fiqh, were upon one creed, and that is the creed of the Sahaba, which is what we are referring to here. Yes. So they say, for example, we have Ibn Hajar. Ibn Hajar is a 9th century scholar. And now he's a 7th to 8th century scholar. So they're great Imams, yes they were. But who's he and who's Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? Understand? For every Imam that they bring, we'll bring you 10 Imams that were greater than them. We'll bring you 10 Imams that were greater than them. You see, argument to authority is not dalil. What's argument to authority? But our Shaykh is so and so. Now we have this Shaykh, we have Ibn Taymiyyah, oh we have this one. And what we have Ibn Qayyim and we have that one. Every group has the Imams. Every group has the Shaykhs. So if this is the argument, lakum deenukum waliya deen. Huh? Bring the Shia, they got their Shaykhs. Khalas, you follow your Shaykhs. At the end of the day, we go back to who? Sahaba. Did the Sahaba believe this? Prove it. Show me one Sahabi that believed this. You can, we'll look into it. If you cannot, sorry, we're not interested. And Nawawi, not a Sahabi. Ibn Hajar, not a Sahabi. There were Imams who got things right and he got things wrong. Just like every other scholar, every other Imam. They were prone to mistakes. They're not ma'soom. Who are ma'soom? Is Allah, His Messenger, and the agreement of the Ummah. That's why we only take our Aqeedah from these sources. We only take our Aqeedah from these sources. Because those 3 sources can never be wrong. Can never be wrong. As if I'm going to come with this Shaykh and that Shaykh and this Shaykh, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the Hakim, he will make ijtihad and he will get things right, he'll get double the reward. If he gets it wrong, he'll get a single reward. Because at the end of the day, they make mistakes. Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala said, كُلُّ عَالِمٍ يُؤْخَذُ عَنْهُ وَيُرَدْ. Every scholar will take from him at times, and at times he will reject from him. إِلَّا صَاحِبَ هَذَا الْقَبْرِ. Except the occupant of this grave. And he pointed to the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Except him. Everything he says, we take it. We'll never reject it. But any other alim, we take and we reject. We take, and why? Because he gets it right, we take it. But the dalil, we accept. Made a mistake, we reject. That's the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Right? So, our sources for Aqeedah is Quran and Sunnah. And like I said, you can add to this Ijma' the Ijma'. Anything that's been agreed upon, no differences. That's part of our creed. Right? To end off, we have just point number 3, which is the hadith. As I mentioned last week, the hadith of iftiraq, the hadith of splitting. The Ummah was split into 73 sects, all into the hellfire except one. Sahaba said, who are they, Ya Rasulullah? He said, هِيَ مَنْ كَانَ عَلَى مِثْلِ مَا أَنَا عَلَيْهِ الْيَوْمِ وَأَصْحَابِي. It's the group that is on what I and my Sahaba adhere to on this day. today. That's the group that will be saved. That's why they called al-firqatul najiyah, the saved sect. Right? The saved sect because they follow what the Sahaba were upon. طيب, so utmost importance is the sources of law. That we stick to that when we study Aqeedah. We stick to that when we study Aqeedah, and not to fall into, like I said, innovated sources of law. So ilm al-kalam, Greek philosophy, is a bid'ah in reality. It's bid'ah, it's not part of the Quran and Sunnah. It's been brought in later on. So to use that for your creed is falling into bid'ah, into innovation, which leads to division, splitting in the ummah, and of course it will weaken the ummah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Now, any questions we have before we wrap up?
And what would you say is the best of the four? Not really the best of all.
Any Aqeedah questions firstly? Yes.
You mentioned
Yes.
said that some cases all of them, there still might be even one or two ideas.
I never said Sahaba. I said after the Sahaba, I said Tabi'een, Atba'u Tabi'een. I said amongst them you will find in those generations, like I mentioned the hadith of Ibn Umar, where a man came and said these people who reject the Qadr. They were not Sahaba. They're not Sahaba who reject the Qadr. Remember, Ibn Umar is the son of Umar. He's younger. So he lives and he sees more, groups of people.
So the generation after
So when we say when again, I did not say Sahaba, I'm 100% sure. I said you will find amongst the generation of the Tabi'een or Atba'u Tabi'een people that were misguided. Right? Yes. So I'm saying when the Prophet praised that generation, as a generation, nobody comes equal to them. Sahaba number one. Then those who follow them, then those who follow them. This does not mean that amongst each generation, every person is upon guidance. And it's very important that we differentiate between Sahaba and other than Sahaba. Sahaba, all of them are trustworthy. All of them are righteous. They made mistakes, but they are not like those who came after them. Why? Because Allah praised them in the Quran, in various ayat. The Prophet ﷺ praised him in many ahadith. Status of Sahaba is a chapter, books have been written about Fadail Sahaba. The groups that come after them will never reach the Sahaba, ever. So when we speak about the Sahaba, individually we will say all of them are trustworthy, all of them upon khair. In the Tabi'un, Atba'u Tabi'in, what they agreed upon is khair. The Imams were great Imams, but there were people in between. This is when the misguidance started to creep in. Slowly, innovation crept in. So for example, who murdered Uthman? Uthman was murdered by Muslims. Khawarij. Khawarij murdered Uthman, radiallahu anhu. So that shows you that the Ummah became, bid'ah started to spread. Misguidance started to creep in. So someone might come to you and say, Khawarij is the way of the Salaf. They were around amongst the Tabi'een. The same generation, you with me? They met Sahaba, which means they are Tabi'een. You with me? What is a Sahabi? Someone who met the Prophet ﷺ, saw the Prophet and believed in him as a Prophet. He's a Muslim. What's a Tabi'i? Someone who met the Sahaba. These people met the Sahaba, killed Sahaba. Are they not upon the way of the Salaf? They're not from the second best generation? Yes, they are. But that Aqeedah was not the Aqeedah of the Sahaba. Plus, the righteous Imams at the time refuted it. So these were fringe groups at the time that popped up. Qadariyah started to come about. They came to Ibn Umar. These people who reject Qadr. So Umar refuted them. So that's not the way of the Salaf. It's individual opinions that came about in those generations. That's what I mean. But this was not in the era of just the Sahaba. If you're with me, while the Prophet was alive and the Sahaba did not fall into these deviances. They did not fall into these deviances. There's a hadith that mentions that the Sahaba are the stars of this ummah. Stars protect the sky. Stars protect us. When they go, then all the innovations will come out. The misguidance will come out. As the Sahaba passed, slowly, everything started to creep into the ummah. That answers what you were addressing. Barakallahu feek.